And you have to forgive me one thing, is that after 9 months without giving any lecture, I have a little stage fright, and so forgive me a little bit about that. And also forgive me of changing the title of today's lecture. The original title was Stages of Democratic Movement in Hong Kong. And as I'm from the law faculty, I think for a public lecture of this kind, I should go back to my own professional subject, law, so therefore I change it to the future of Hong Kong's rule of law. But I'll surely talk about the development of democracy in Hong Kong, because the concept of the rule of law in some ways is very much related with democracy, and I'll further explain that. I don't know, when you see this title, what kind of reaction you may have. You talk about the future of Hong Kong's rule of law. I think for those people from Hong Kong, Benny Tai is famous for his being very naive. When you talk about the rule of law, and you added the future of the rule of law, I don't know whether you will have this reaction. That will be the reaction from I call it the realist. You talk about rule of law future under the authoritarian rule of the Chinese Communist Party. Hong Kong's rule of law has no future. So actually you're talking about something that has no meaning, or there's no value of talking about that. That may be the first reaction from some people of this title, the future of the rule of law, because, well, we don't have a future. But there will be another realist will have a very different response, that you dare to talk about, I think you can recognize who this guy. You dare to talk about the future of Hong Kong's rule of law? You are the one who should be responsible for all the troubles. Only by ending all violence and restoring order can we have a future. So we talk about the future of the rule. Maybe there can be a future, but surely it's not Benny Tai who should be talking about it. So that's another possible reaction. These are two viewless response to the title. Now we may have a theorist. So for those who are more familiar with the theories of the rule of law, that may be a response to the title, that it is meaningless to talk about the future of the rule of law. When we study the rule of law, future is a relevant concept. We don't talk about so-called future of the rule of law. We talk about rule of law, and only rule of law, but not about something called the future. So this is a wrong title to be used. So that may be the response of some theorists. Jurists, they are more the kind of legally trained people, and they may have another response to my title. Law is only about law. And any talk on the rule of law should only look at things that are purely legal. So your title seems to imply you're going to talk about something that is not purely legal. So he may object to this title also. So why I foresee all these possible criticisms to my title, not to talk about the content, just the title itself may be problematic, just like I'm a very problematic person in Hong Kong, so as my title is problematic also. Now the reason I raise this is because I hope to look at some of the myths of the rule of law. In Hong Kong, as you know, we have the so-called the yellow camp, and we have the blue camp, and both sides are asserting the other side are damaging the rule of law. So the blue camp will say that the yellow camp people, they are doing things that are hurting the rule of law. The yellow camp will say that, oh, what we are doing is trying to advance the rule of law, and what the existing situation is a problem to the rule of law. So how to judge? And before we can really talk about the future of the rule of law, we have to understand what do you mean by the rule of law. And before we can really have an understanding about the rule of law, I want to talk about some of the so-called myths of the rule of law. Now, the myth number one, a lot of people will put rule of law as only one thing, law and order. So rule of law equal law and order. So if you are doing anything that disturbs the law and order, you are in a way damaging the rule of law. And by maintaining or restoring law and order, that is the way we maintain the rule of law. But is rule of law just about law and order? I'm not saying that law and order is not related with rule of law. But I'm saying is rule of law just about law and order? Okay? So that I would say a kind of myth number one. And because some people consider that rule of law is only about law and order, and in some way the present conflict we are facing in Hong Kong is originated from this myth number one. Some people assert that law and order is the only overriding concern of Hong Kong. But some people think that rule of law is more than law and order. So another myth is more a kind of, may interest those who are doing some theoretical study about rule of law. I call it a kind of checklist approach. To some people, whether there's rule of law or not, they have a checklist. Okay? It may be more than just law and order, but they will have a checklist. And so they go through the checklist, tick, 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 tick. Okay, 10 out of the features of the rule of law. Oh, you have 3 to 4. Okay, you fail the test, and so you will not satisfy the requirement of the rule of law. And you have 10 out of 7 or 8 out of that 10 features, you prove to have that, and so it seems to be in a good order, rule of law. So it's a checklist approach. And later there's another myth I'll show you is a kind of yes or no. You have rule of law or you do not have rule of law. By combining the two myths, actually, you have a checklist. You just work out what should be in the checklist. Different people may have a different list. So if you go to the bookstore and try to find some books on the rule of law, you will find that the different authors, they have included different things in the checklist. And so when we try to look at the rule of law in a particular place, so you just go through a checklist. But I would say another myth is that rule of law may be more than a checklist. I'll explain further what how I see the rule of law. Now, this is also linked with this checklist approach, that in most authors, in most people who study about the rule of law, what they include in their checklist, or maybe the top item of the checklist, is about judicial independence. Okay? So whether a place has a rule of law or not, okay, they will see whether they have judicial independence. They care mainly about the legal institutions, whether the judiciary can maintain its independence. If yes, you have rule of law, because it's top in the checklist. If no, then they worry about the rule of law of the place. Now, again, I'm not saying that judicial independence is unimportant, but if we just look at judicial independence, can it tell us that we have a healthy rule of law? Or maybe we may ask further, how we can maintain judicial independence? Is this only about the judiciary? Only about all things just purely about legal? Or are there other factors that will determine or affect whether the judicial independence can be maintained? So this myth number 3 is that if we just cared about judicial independence, and if you use this as a criterion to judge the rule of law of Hong Kong, you may find that, well, at least up to this point, the rule of law of Hong Kong may not be too problematic, because we still have a certain degree of judicial independence, even though the court may be under a lot of pressure now. But still, we can maintain a certain degree of judicial independence. So when you talk about the future, so are you talking about the future of judicial independence or more than that? So that's another myth of the rule of law. Myth number 4, rule of law is something that you can only have it in Western societies, but not for non-Western societies. Now, they may have some evidence to prove that, because if you look at an institution, the name of the institution is called World Justice Project. Every year, they will have a report ranking the legal systems of the whole world. Those rank high in the list, they are all Western countries. Okay? Only in the top 20, only very few, they are from non-Western societies. So some will say that, well, Chinese people, there's no way that we can have rule of law in Chinese societies. But I think the case of Hong Kong may be an exception. This is mainly a Chinese society, and Hong Kong ranked, as I recall, is 16 or 17. It's not top in the list, but at least Hong Kong ranked high in the out of that 100 and something countries under the study. So is it only for Western societies? So that's another thing we'll look at. So I've mentioned this myth. Rule of law is a question of yes or no. But is it a question of yes or no? Or can we have a more sophisticated way of looking at the rule of law? That is, it may be a matter of degree. You may have more rule of law. You may have less rule of law. And how to determine more or less? If we are going to use a checklist, what should be in the checklist? What factors that will affect the more rule of law or less rule of law? Now, if we can get beyond this myth, then we can talk about the future. Because if it's just talking about yes or no, I think that talking about the future of the rule of law of Hong Kong will be not too challenging. It's maybe quite boring just to talk about, okay, there will be no more rule of law in Hong Kong in the future. Oh yeah, we may have, but if we can have a more sophisticated understanding, then beyond this yes or no kind of understanding, then we may talk about rule of law in a more interesting way. Now I'm getting to things are a bit more academic and difficult now. That for those who are familiar with the rule of law literature, you will know that we have so-called the thick theory of the rule of law and the so-called the thin theory of the rule of law. And I think the meaning is actually it's not too complicated, and usually academics try to make things complicated and make the life of their students difficult. That's the life of the work of an academic. So actually it's not too difficult. Actually it's quite straightforward, and you can use your common sense to understand it. So thin theory means that you have, according to if you apply so-called the checklist approach, you will have lesser items in your checklist. So if you can satisfy those requirements, so that's using a thin approach, then you may have the rule of law. But the thick theory will require more. Especially, the thin theory care more about what kind of institutions you have. So whether you have an independent judiciary, whether you have the police force, whether they, well, it's a very sensitive issue to talk about today, the police force. Okay, it's just about the police force. All these things are institutional. But the thick theory asks something more. They will ask, what's in the law? What's in the law? Does the law provide sufficient protection to the rights of the people? According to thin theory, you can have everyone equal before the law. Procedurally, everyone is equal before the law, but there's no guarantee that everyone enjoy equal protection by the law. I don't know whether you see the difference between equal before the law and the equal protection by the law. The law can be very discriminative. You can have a law that will discriminate, but it's equally applied to everyone. So for all black people, no matter how rich you are, you cannot go inside this park. You cannot, because the law says so. It's equally applied to everyone. But there's no equal protection by the law, because the law itself is discriminatory. So the thick theory of the rule of law asks something more. The thick theory asks that we look not just what kind of legal institutions for law to practice. We also want to know or expect that the law be able to provide basic protections to the rights of people or be able to achieve justice. So that's the theories that have been used by especially Western world, thick and thin theory. But I would call it still a myth, because this thick and thin understanding may be still too simple. Because what's the relationship between the thick and thin? How we get from the thin to the thick? Should we prefer a thick or we prefer a thin theory? So all these things may not be answered by just presenting that the rule of law is about a thick theory or thin theory. So I have outlined these 6 myths of the rule of law. In some way, they are linked with the situation of Hong Kong, and I'll further explain that because we are talking about the future of the rule of law of Hong Kong. I just want to lay the foundation for us to see the future, how to ascertain or picture a future of the rule of Hong Kong. So we have to kind of get beyond a lot of myths of the rule of law discussion. Now, I don't want to get too complicated or academic, but I would just, and also for a lecture of this kind, it's better to engage everyone rather than just I stand here and talk and talk and talk. So that is a framework that I may invite your participation. And in some way that will help you develop some understanding of the rule of law that may be beyond all the myths I've mentioned. Now the question is very simple. What is the primary purpose of the law? So in a society, and maybe you are not from the law school or you have not studied law before, actually it's for everyone. Every orange citizen can do it. I've done this exercise in the prison with an inmate. And I talked with him that, what do you think is the ultimate purpose of law, okay? So everyone can do it. So I ask you, what is the primary purpose of the law? Now, I use this term primary. That means that all these purposes, they are purposes of law. In every society, the law can be used for one of these purposes, okay? But when I ask you that, what do you think is the primary? What I mean is that the most important purpose. It overrides the other purposes. So for example, if you think maintain social order is the most important purpose of law, even if powers of the government may not be subject to too much restriction, but if the powers of the law the order can be maintained, that is the primary purpose. It overrides the other purposes. Or you say achieve justice is the overriding purpose. Now, there may be some disturbance to maintain order, but because it is important to achieve justice, so we can accept a certain degree of disturbance to the order. So that's what I mean that the primary purpose. Okay? So 4 different purposes. Why can you have more? So if anyone who have attended my class, you will know that there are actually 22 there. But I will try to narrow down to 4 main purposes. So let me give you a few seconds to think about it. And you can indicate by raising your hand that you think that is the most important purpose of law. Okay? Okay, let's start with maintaining social order. Who think that is the primary purpose? The primary purpose, the most important purpose. Okay, anyone? Okay, 1, 2, I see some hands there. Okay, then how about to guide human behavior? I think that's I need not explain too much. That it's just you have a law, you know what you should do, what you should not do, and so that's to guide your behavior. Anyone think is the most important is to guide human behavior? Okay, we have some hands also. To limit the powers of government. Anyone think that is the most important purpose? Okay, so we have also some hands up. To achieve justice. Anyone? Well, biased sample. People who come to Benny Tai's public lecture. Okay. Now I can tell you that for those who have attended my class, we have asked these similar questions in class in our Common Core course. Students not just from the law school but different faculties. Basically, it's a competition between two: social order and achieve justice. And I have also used this exercise among teachers, when I provide trainings for teachers, among civil servants, the same kind of pattern. Basically, it's between these two: achieve justice and social order. Now, but if you study or read those legal materials on the rule of law, mainly written by Western authors, you will find that this is the purpose. Most Western authors that will identify to be the main purpose of law. But I think in the case of Hong Kong, well, especially the recent incidents, we may see the importance of this. But they are all interconnected. I think by showing you the different purposes, you may see that actually the four purposes, they're interconnected. Social order is important. I emphasize again, I'm not saying that it's unimportant. It's very important. It's the foundation of any law system. But beyond order, do we need powers being constrained? I think that one is very basic to guide human behavior. That's the basic requirement or basic function of law, that you know what to do. You want to make a contract, you want to buy a property, you know what to do in order to get the things you want under the law. So, but beyond that, powers be constrained. But why we want to constrain the powers? Well, surely we want something more, that the powers will be used to achieve justice. Surely the justice concept itself complicated, and I'm not going to the details on the debates on the meaning of the justice, but at least you can see by this framework, we can have a more complicated understanding or sophisticated understanding of the rule of law. But I will quote this author's work, and there's a quotation. I think that will take us even beyond the talks merely about the different purposes. We may have to ask, why some people believe that maintain social order as the primary purpose? Why some people will think restraining powers as the primary purpose? Why some people think that achieve justice should be the primary purpose? What's the underlying factor shaping the views of the people? Now, that cannot be answered by lawyers. Lawyers can tell you what the law is or how the law will be applied by the court and the different kind of legal practices in order to get what you want from the trial or from the other parties in the contract, all these things. But we need to know something more than that. And as the author said, the rule of law is as much a culture as a set of institutions, as much a matter of habits, commitments, and beliefs of ordinary people as of legal codes. So it's not about the beliefs of lawyers, the beliefs of judges, the legally trained people. Maybe among the legally trained people, you may not find this kind of culture. But it's the ordinary people, their beliefs, their values. That's the most important thing. Institutions and codes are important, but without the cultural and the political commitment to back them up. Now that's talking about is not just about some people embracing those values, but they must do something to back them up before you can have the rule of law, or the rule of law that you want. The future of the rule of law. So what kind of future you want? You want order, law and order? Rule of law as law and order? Or you want rule of law to achieve justice? You set the target, you set your goal. How to achieve it is not relying just on the lawyers, the judges. It requires everyone, ordinary people, committed to those values, embrace those values, and are willing to do something to back them up. So that's, if you look at the title of this book, you'll know that why the authors make those points. It's about that when there's a military intervention into some countries, and then mainly the United States or some Western states, they want to build up a rule of law system in the society, but just they find that it's not easy, so the authors have chapters talking about this experience, and that's what they observe. They conclude that it is about the legal culture of the people. That's the most important thing about the rule of law. If you want to have a future, a bright future of the rule of law, depending on how to define the rule of law first, surely. Now, I think with this background, then you know that the conflict or the kind of situation we are now facing in Hong Kong. So when we talk about the future of the rule of law, Hong Kong's rule of law, you'll know that we are not talking about merely what kind of institutions, what kind of what laws we should have. Should we make the emergency provision ordinance? Okay, make the rules under that, or what? Or what should be in the basic law? I think it's beyond that. And actually it's a clash. We can see it's a clash of the different values of the rule of law. And Samuel Huntington, in his book, talking about the clash of civilization, in some way linked it with the discussion here I'm presenting, is about the two sets of values, the materialistic values. Those who think that, well, making money is the most important thing. You know, you haven't gone out, you haven't earned a penny, okay? You're still studying. You know, what do you know? Okay? You know your dads and your mothers so working so hard in order to make a living for the family. So you don't know anything. The most important thing is about survival, materialistic values. But surely another generation, they will think that, well, it's not merely about making money. It's about whether we can have the freedoms, we can express our views, we can have our own identity. So the two sets of values. So the law, the rule of law, we are talking about the rule of law. What's the purpose? To ensure order so that everyone will have a good environment to make money? And or should we have a system that we can ensure those post-materialistic, some scholars call that post-materialistic values, like equality, freedoms, democracy, human rights, all these things. And we need to achieve that purpose. And actually that is the clash we can see in Hong Kong. The clash between these two sets of values. These two sets of values. So I think I'm really running out of time. I still have more than 50 slides. So I will have to go very fast. I will have to jump some of the slides. So I think I will skip all these things. This is the rule of law as levels, rule of law as stages. I think you can understand that if you have a more sophisticated understanding of rule of law, is that you can see the gradual development of the rule of law. And so when you can talk about rule of law as a development, then it's only if you can understand rule of law as a kind of development, then it's meaningful to talk about the future. Because the rule of law is not a static matter. It's developing, it's a dynamic, it's a changing matter. And rule of law is not merely about the institutions, but about the culture. Now, I want to talk a little bit more, and again, I will jump this slides very fast. That is about the very special things about Hong Kong. Especially for the experience we have in the past few years and also in the past few months. More and more, I believe that the future of the rule of law in Hong Kong has a meaning, not just for Hong Kong, and not just for China, but also for the world. And that's the very special experience we have in Hong Kong may allow us to develop a more sophisticated understanding of the rule of law. So for the Western societies, when people start to study about the rule of law, they already have the rule of law. So that's not much things that's something that they fail to recognize. But for societies like China, they do not have the rule of law of a very more sophisticated level. When they talk about the rule of law, they can only talk about law and order, or they can talk about the legalist, the traditional Chinese thinking about law as a tool to govern, for the emperor to use to dominate. That's the kind of understanding about rule of law or the law. But Hong Kong, with a very unique experience, that we actually, as Chris Patton, our last governor, said, is a East meet West, a place where East meet West. And under this very special situation, we can have a very different, or I would say a very unique occasion for us to understand the rule of law. So I will go through the slides very fast. So we start from a fishing village. Actually, you should go to the National Geographic. They have also a very short history, and actually if you go to the National Geographic, and they have provided this history, but I will provide something a little bit more because I will link it with the understanding of the rule of law. And hope that by this very quick review of the history, you will see that Hong Kong becomes a British colony, and we have the British laws introduced into Hong Kong, including those draconian laws we have during the colonial rule. And there's a growing society, and that has inspired Sun Yat-sen, the leader of the revolution, the 1911 revolution of China, because of his experience in Hong Kong, that caused him to lead the revolution in 1911. A booming economy in 1970s. So really, the law system developed. We, in a way, inherit from the Brits, in some way, allowed a booming economy, and even developed into a financial center. And the rule of law system does provide the foundation for Hong Kong to have to develop into an international financial center. But I think for those from Hong Kong, you know that when we talk about the Lion Rock spirit, that's the song sung by your parents. Okay, anyone know how to sing it? Not this generation. So we talk about the Lion Rock is that it's very much like the American dream. You work hard, and then you will be able to improve the livelihood of your family. And the most important thing, you need to work hard. No one is going to take care of you. You have to work hard yourself. Then your family's economic situation will improve. That's the so-called the Lion Rock spirit. But then there's a very important development in Hong Kong in the 70s, is the setting up of the Independent Commission Against Corruption, ICAC. Okay, that's a landmark in Hong Kong's rule of law. Before that, we may have a law and order kind of rule of law, but we did not have a rule of law that able to constrain the powers of government, because it's a corrupted government during the colonial time. And only the time when we have the ICAC, the Independent Commission Against Corruption, that's a very important development. And we have the common law legal system. We're still having the common law legal system. That's also the link between the Hong Kong with the West. And after the transfer of sovereignty, we are still maintaining the common law legal system. A lot of protection we have are based on the common law legal system we have now. And the basic law still maintain the common law legal system in Hong Kong, but it's under challenge. And Hong Kong developed also into a global city. Hong Kong is, I think even before the transfer of sovereignty, Hong Kong is not merely a city under the British rule. It has its own international status. Okay? It can join some international treaties, some international organizations. So after the transfer of sovereignty, Hong Kong continued to enjoy this special status in the world. And that's also why in the past few months, there are a lot of conflicts, not just in Hong Kong. You can also find that in Moscow. Actually, more people are being arrested in Moscow. But which place being reported more? So you can see that Hong Kong enjoys a kind of special status, even in the international community's perspective. Now, but then Hong Kong is a part of China, so we have the People's Republic of China, and we have the Cultural Revolution, and there's no law there during that time. Sorry. And we have a lot of refugees after the 1949 came to Hong Kong, and some of the people here, your parents or your grandparents, they may be from mainland China. And so when they come, they may also bring all the culture they have from the mainland China. And that's a very important thing is about the international status of Hong Kong. Hong Kong was a British colony, but Hong Kong people could not exercise the right to self-determination as other British colonies, because in 1972, when China, People's Republic of China, became the representative of China in the United Nations, that status or that kind of right has been, in a way, taken away. So that's the future of Hong Kong. We cannot exercise the right of self-determination, Then we have the Sino-British negotiation on Hong Kong's future, and then we have the Joint Declaration, and we have the basic law, so the law we have, trying to maintain the laws we have. And surely the June 4th massacre has a very important implication for the development of the rule of law in Hong Kong. And that's the first incident. I've just published an article at the Journal of Democracy talking about the relationship between the Tiananmen incident and the massacre and the democratic development of Hong Kong. To my generation, born in the 60s, actually we were very much influenced by the June 4th. Because of the June 4th, that has inspired my generation to aspire for democracy in Hong Kong. And we have the last governor trying to bring in some change to the system, but at the end failed. And then we have the Hong Kong SAR, and we have the election of the chief executive. I think that's the focus of all our conflicts about how our chief executive should be elected. And Article 23, some of you may know about the Article 23 legislation in 2003. That's the first territory-wide social movement. It was not about democracy directly. It was about the making of a national security law. And a lot of people worry that the national security law will infringe the rights of the Hong Kong people, the freedoms of Hong Kong people. So 500,000 people demonstrate. That's the first territory-wide social movement. And then we have several constitutional reforms trying to change the law, introduce universal suffrage, but at the end, failed. But at least in the second round, there was a promise that there will be direct election of the chief executive in 2017. And then we have this anti-national curriculum movement in 2012, another large-scale social movement in the society. But this time you have the young people participating. In 2003, mainly the middle class and the middle-aged people participate. But then we have the young people participating. And then we have Xi Jinping to be the new Chinese leader. And then we have the Occupy Central with Love and Peace. We strive for the universal suffrage. And then we have the 831 decisions. And we have the umbrella movement. And then we have this, I call it the new Lion Rock spirit. It is not just about materialistic values, survival. It is talking about a new Lion Rock spirit. It's about universal suffrage, democracy. Okay? And we have the failure of the third constitutional reform. And we have the fishbowl revolution. And I met Leung Tin-Kei, ever learn at Shek Pik. And we have a chance to talk with each other. A very short occasion, but we share with each other. And I find him more and more like me, okay? More and more like non-violence through disobedience, okay? But I think now the slogan that he advanced became the slogan of the present movement. And we have the disqualification of legislators. Carrie Lam as the chief executive, how long will she be the chief executive? No one knows, even she cannot decide. And then we have the imprisonment of Joshua Wong, the student leaders. He's going to be imprisoned again, okay? I can be very sure. Then we have any talk on independence now being banned, being kind of questioned and challenged. So I have not included anything about independence here. No, I have a slide here. Okay, maybe I'll skip it, okay? And then my imprisonment, the Occupy leaders, and then we have this anti-extradition movement, and the protests are still continuing, and maybe we are still talking about the violence and non-violence methods. So I've gone through this a very quick review of the history, and I don't know whether you can see in the history some of the unique things about the rule of law of Hong Kong. From here, I'll skip this. You can see that is a missing part of Hong Kong's rule of law. That we might have the judicial independence, surely we have the law and order. But the problem is that we do not have a very important part of the rule of law. So when we talk about democracy, a lot of people may separate democracy and the rule of law and seeing that as two separate things. But from the experience of Hong Kong, can you have the rule of law without democracy? I think that is something a story of Hong Kong can tell. And we try very hard to fight for democracy. Yes, democracy by itself is important. It's the exercise of the rights. But from a rule of law perspective, everyone in Hong Kong will have no disagreement that we all support the rule of law. But what is the rule of law you're talking about? And can you have the rule of law you're talking about without democracy? Even if you are saying that rule of law is just about judicial independence. I don't care about all other things. I just care about judicial independence. Can you have rule of law as judicial independence without democracy? Maybe we can have it before the transfer of sovereignty, when our sovereign itself was a democratic state. But now, under a very different situation, can we have? So democracy or democratic election as an important mechanism to constrain the powers of government is also an exercise of the rights of the people. This is the missing part. And that is the connection between rule of law and democracy. And that's why, even though I've changed the title, Stages of Democracy, to the Future of Rule of Law of Hong Kong, actually I'm talking about the same thing. So also that's the trick of academics. So we have the same title, different titles, but actually most of the things are the same. Okay? This is the important thing about Hong Kong's democratic movement and the rule of law, is that the Hong Kong's democratic movement played a key role in developing Hong Kong's rule of law. So that's why a law professor becomes a leader in the democratic movement. Actually, I'm not doing my job if law is just about law, democracy is about democracy. You cannot see the connection. To me, to fight for democracy is to defend or to develop the rule of law of Hong Kong. They are interconnected. But the present situation we are facing, I don't know if anyone has come across this term before. When you have something called rule of law, people can add things before it and change it into something that may have a totally different meaning. It's called authoritarian rule of law. Law is being used by the authoritarian system to ensure its authoritarian rule. Rights of the people are not respected, but it still claims to be rule of law. Okay? But it's called authoritarian rule of law. That's the situation after the umbrella movement in the past few years, and up to this very point, we can see the force of the authoritarian rule of law. So what has been done? That upholding law and order as the official discourse of Hong Kong's rule of law. Now, every day at 4 o'clock, at the police, as the press conference of the police force, you will see what they are talking about. That is the rule of law they're talking about. Okay? And we can see in the past few years, the authoritarian rule of law has been used to oppress the opposition, to pressurize the court through the interpretation power of the standing committee under the basic law. The court is under great pressure, and silence the public. So we have Chen Ho-tin and Victor Mallet from the foreign correspondents that because of organizing that talk for Chen Ho-tin and even Victor Mallet was not allowed to get in Hong Kong anymore, so to silence the public. So these are all methods used by the authoritarian system to maintain law and order as the overriding concern of law in Hong Kong. And we are still experiencing it. One day, we cannot organize a lecture of this kind here at Hong Kong U. That means that the authoritarian rule of law is going even further. Okay? At this point, we can still have this public lecture, and I can still say things of this kind. There may still be hope. But, well, I don't want to talk about it. But what's the future? Now, so we asked that, I'm sensitive to time. I may talk about 5 minutes per bit, 5 minutes more, then we may have a time for questions, okay? So what's the success or failure of Hong Kong's democratic movement? If you say institutional change, do we have a democratic election? No, we fail. Do we have a cultural change? How Hong Kong people, especially the younger generation, how they see the rule of law? And I think the movement we have now, we have the evidence that our young people, our younger generation, they are demanding for something much more than their parents. Okay? I think if you look at it this way, the culture for a more sophisticated, a more advanced understanding of the rule of law, we have the culture now. We have a very sound foundation, I would even say. Okay? Even though you are biased samples, but reflecting from what you have indicated, at least all of you here will agree that we want a rule of law. We want a future of the rule of law in Hong Kong, not merely about law and order, not merely about ensuring everyone to have a lot of chance to make money. We want to make money, surely, but more than that. That's what we want more. How to cultivate, further develop this rule of law culture? What we are doing here. Education, this is a question of education. But I think social movement. I think after this summer. And I have this opportunity to be an impartial spectator, and this is a term used by Adam Smith, to observe this movement. Actually, I was forced to do so. I could not participate. So when the movement started, at my cell, I read the newspaper, the reports about the movement, and I find that and been out for around 2 weeks now. I think the movement itself has changed Hong Kong. I think you agree that, and it's going to change Hong Kong further. And the class boycott. This morning, still many schools they participate. They face challenges from their teachers, headmasters. But I think people are still striving for the change. So, I will not ask you to respond how to advance Hong Kong's rule of law, civil education, civil disobedience, 禁左交, okay? And violent actions or voting. So that's something we may also use. And I would say is, again, you do not need to make a choice. Actually, we use all the things together. Maybe at different point of time, you use different methods. So the coming time, 24th November, will be time for voting. So think about it. Now, really, time is really running out. So I think I will skip the remaining slides. I'm just give you to think about what are the key factors. Internal factors, external factors. You know, internal factors are how Hong Kong people, they perceive the future. The external factors, surely, China is a very important factor. Okay? And I'll skip this. Another external factor will be the international recognition of Hong Kong's special status. As I mentioned, Hong Kong from a global city, from a financial center to a global city. And I must mention something. It's very academic. It's nothing related with independence. I have to emphasize again. And the Nobel Prize winner in economics in 2018, Paul Romer, he has mentioned a concept called Charter City. And he used Hong Kong as example. It's a non-sovereign entity, but with international recognition of special status, to make it very simple. So you may Google and try to look at what do you mean by Charter City. Okay? Again, I will not talk too much about it. So I'll end by this slide. 香港人加油. Okay? Now, actually, this slogan is very important from the perspectives of international law. Under the international law, if you want to get recognition, I'm not saying independent status, but at least if you want to get international recognition of a special status, there are two requirements. One, you must have a very strong identity of yourself. And second, not only that you have to have that very strong sense or awareness of your own identity, that you are willing to do something to defend or to maintain your identity. So that's why every night at 10 o'clock, over Hong Kong, you have someone saying, 香港人! 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 Okay, thank you. So, it's the time for question. So anyone would like, I think they have someone to pass the mic. And then anyone want to raise some questions or what? Yep. Yes. Yeah, someone here? Yeah. Raise your hand first.
Yeah, okay. So you mentioned that the cultural change of the rule of law culture in Hong Kong has been very successful. However, how can that cultural change can bring institutional change while we have a bunch of unelected bureaucrats inside the cabinets?
Well, that's the slides that I have jumped, I've skipped. That's linked with I would say it must be linked with the China's future. I think internally, as Carrie Lam said, our options are limited. And so we have to wait for the change in China. That's my view, okay? We have to wait for it. I'm not saying the collapse of the Chinese Communist Party, okay? I'm just saying that we have to wait for the change. And David Shamborn, one of the very famous scholars in China studies, in his book China's Future, he talked about four different, he said China is at a crossroad. And there are different possibilities of the development. So from new totalitarianism, so we are at the new totalitarianism, hard authoritarianism, soft authoritarianism, some democracy. I'm not further explaining it, but I just mentioned it. You can Google it and or read the book. And also Professor Pei Ming Sin, he has coined a term called revolution. That is if China start to conduct some kind of reform, but at the end it may bring a revolution. So it's called revolution. So that's another possible development. So I'm not going to say which possible development, but change may happen. If anything change in China, Hong Kong is also at a crossroad. So we have also the different options. And Paul Romer's idea, I would say the fifth option. So whether we will have a future of the rule of law or democracy in some ways linked it with what's happened in China. But we cannot decide what will happen in China. What we can decide is this. This is what we can decide. We can prepare ourselves for the coming change. I cannot tell when it will come. It may be 2 years later. It may be 5 years later. It may be 10 years later. It may be 20 years later. I may have died already. But I think you will be able to see it. So are we ready for that? Are we prepared for that? Sometimes I worry that it comes too fast. But I'm always being criticized as too naive and too optimistic. But maybe it comes too fast. Are we ready for the change? So that's, I cannot give you a direct answer, but I will say that we have to do our parts and wait for the change, the opportunity. And when the opportunity comes, we'll be able to grasp that opportunity. And I make a qualification again, I'm not saying independence. Repeat it, I am not saying independence of Hong Kong, okay? Any other questions? Yep.
Thank you very much for the speech. A question I have would be, how do you compare the rule of law of Hong Kong and Singapore? Since it's been concluded that there's a missing part in the rule of law of Hong Kong because of the missing democratic system. But I know that Singapore does not have this part either, so I'm just wondering, how do you see it? Yeah.
Actually, the term authoritarian rule of law, I plagiarized it from an author from Singapore who wrote about the rule of law of Singapore. And that was the kind of rule of law that Singapore has. And surely it's not totally the same, but you can see that why Singapore can maintain that kind of rule of law to a certain extent is because Singaporeans accept that kind of rule of law. And even you will say, if you look at the World Justice Project's, their ranking, Singapore ranked higher than Hong Kong. There must be some problem with that methodology, that's why. But I will not answer this question directly. I'll put it in this way. Hong Kong people accept the Singaporean style of rule of law? I don't think Hong Kong people will accept that. And if we have democracy, but that democracy is something that the ruling party, you have the right to vote, but the ruling party can use all kinds of methods to facilitate the people to vote according to the wish of the ruling party. Now that actually is a very sophisticated skill. I don't think the Chinese Communist Party has learned that yet. Maybe in the future. But even Singaporean, I think the Singaporeans will have to face a new situation. That's a new party, okay? A new party supported by also the son of Lee Kuan Yew. And so what will be the future of Singapore? And will Singapore have a different kind of rule of law in the future? So it's actually the Singapore and Hong Kong both are interesting examples for studying rule of law outside the Western world. That both are interesting examples for comparison. So anyone want to write research thesis or that, you can do this study. Yeah. Yep.
Okay, Professor, my question, I have two questions. The first one is, you have stated that two of the main goals of the rule of law is to maintain social order and to achieve justice. However, what we are seeing now is that while the government is overemphasizing on the social order and suppressing justice, the protesters themselves are also sacrificing the social order in order to fight for freedom and justice. So do you think both parties, both sides are not respecting the rule of law? I mean, not only the government, but also the protesters. And my second question is a bit legally sensitive, is that do you think you still have trust in our legal system, and do you think the courts can make fair judgment?
Well, I think the first criticism should not be just placed against the processes we have now, but actually the criticisms have been placed upon me that by advocating civil disobedience, I was kind of damaging or infringing the rule of law. So it's about, that's why we have to understand the rule of law as not just a yes or no. We have to understand rule of law as a process, a development process. So when I will ask the question is that, are those people who are doing the things, no matter you are, say, from the government side or from the protester side, when they are doing the things, now even they might have made a mistake, or even they may, some of the tactics might not be able to achieve their goals. I will ask that, do they honestly believe that what they are doing is in the long run to build up the rule of law of Hong Kong? Okay? Now, I can say that for the movement that I have organized, we have the Occupy Central, the Zhou Gao rule of law, that I honestly believe that what we have done is to build up the rule of law, not to hurt the rule of law. I cannot say anything on behalf of the protesters, but I hope that they can also think about actions when they are planning their actions. Now, everyone makes mistakes, okay? So therefore, they may make a mistake about whether the action they use or the actions they have taken may not bring the results they want. They want a certain result, but it failed to achieve the result. I think everyone will make mistakes. So that's not in a way, it's critical, but it's not the determining factor. More is about where they honestly believe that. So if Carrie Lam honestly believes that what she's doing is for the rule of Hong Kong, maybe she's also right to that extent. Okay. So, but is she really honestly believing that, or the protesters, are they honestly believing that? I think that's the more important thing I will ask. And I've forgotten your second question.
Do you still have trust in our legal system?
Well, so it's again, if you say using a yes or no, that kind of myth, it's difficult to answer your question. But if I use a tactic that is a matter of degree, then I would say that our rule of law, in a way, is deteriorating. That's the experience we have. I think there's no need to question that. But do we have hope about that? Do we have hope that through the cultural change in the Hong Kong society, and the cultural change not just among the law students, the lawyers, but also all ordinary people, we have a foundation for the comeback of the rule of law? We have slided back. It's a sliding back. But can we have a comeback? Then I would say I have confidence. So it's not a direct answer to yes or no, because I avoid to use a yes or no approach to look at the rule of law. Yeah.
Thank you, Professor Tai, for your lecture. I have a question. Just now you mentioned that to cultivate the culture of rule of law, it can be done through education or through social movement. But we can see that the social movement that we are currently having now are not educating everyone, because some people of the so-called blue ribbon camp are actually getting more and like they're more against the idea of rule of law, in fact. So how would you, is there any way to educate those people in the blue ribbon camp with materialistic values?
I have not used it, I have not included, actually in my original slide I've included, but I think it's too long already. Another method is not education in that sense. It's not a curriculum, that kind of things that you study a course. It's more about day-to-day contact, day-to-day interaction. Not to talk about that Dai Sok, that Dai Ma in the street you meet. How about your parents? Okay? When you talk with your parents, who may be blue ribbon, okay? Hope not, but if that's the case, you have no choice. They are still your parents. So how can you change them? It's through your day-to-day interaction. Okay? 執好張床先啦嚇，每一次啊，即係 clean your bed. Okay, when you go out, pack up all your things, so to show that you are committed to your cause, and even at a cause that the things you do not want to do in the past, you are willing to do it just for the cause. So to demonstrate something, I think it may tell more than by just mere talks, by changing your own behavior. When you are saying that you want to respect the rights of everyone, so are you respecting the rights of the people around you? So that's the day-to-day contact, the day-to-day interaction may be more effective. Not to talk about anyone, a stranger you meet in the street, but the one you know. But I know it's easy to say, difficult to do. Even some of the my relatives, I would find it difficult to talk with them in this way. So that's some ideal. Try to practice as much as we can. That's all I can say. Oh, okay. Yeah, first, yeah.
Okay. Thank you, Professor Tai. I would just like to ask, just now when you were answering questions about talking about the China's future, about the revolution, I would notice that you seem to have linked like whether Hong Kong can have sample soon or something. You would seem to have linked the future of China with Hong Kong. Like if China can achieve some certain changes in their society, then Hong Kong can also achieve these changes. So I'm not in any manner broaching the topic of Hong Kong independence, but I would just like to know your take on what are the odds of Hong Kong people actually being able to determine their future?
Well, I think my view is more a viewless view. That the reality is that under the present situation, under the present form of rule in China, when they are still asserting new totalitarianism or hard authoritarianism, it's very difficult for them to allow Hong Kong people to decide our own future. Now, whether the international reaction to the situation of Hong Kong could generate sufficient pressure on the Chinese government to adjust its stance, I think no one can tell. Okay? So in some way, Hong Kong people quite support Donald Trump. And but I think it's not an easy answer to give that at this point. It may be we want to exercise our right to decide our own future. Again, not to say we are supporting independence, okay? Just that to decide our own future. But under the present situation, it's not easy, okay? And so that's why we have to prepare. That's always, I would say, that prepare ourselves for the coming change, if there can be a change. And hope that will be a change. And because we have, as I can see from the present movement, I really have a lot of confidence that the golden, some of you may have heard about that, the golden era of Hong Kong is yet to come. Many people talk about the golden era of Hong Kong is the 80s of the last century. I disagree with that. So we have a lot of pop singers, a lot of movies, the TV dramas at that time seemed to be very creative, but I don't think that's really a golden era of Hong Kong. And we are going to see a real golden era of Hong Kong. And you will be the one who is going to develop that and build that up. And that's why I have confidence.
Professor Tai, I have some questions to ask. Given to the illegitimacy of Carrie Lam's government, who is the puppet of our Beijing central government, we are now giving 5 demands, including Carrie Lam step down, establishing independent authority to
I think
investigate.
her stepping down is not one of the 5, as I can recall. It's a number 6. It's a number 6, right?
But we all wish her to step down, right? Okay,
Yeah,
my question is...
Actually, stepping down is... Okay, I'll let you ask the question. But
my question would be, given that the police are creating horrors and the illegitimacy Carrie Lam's puppet, can we say it is impossible for us right now to achieve the 5 demands? And the second question would be, I want Professor Tai, you to share some advice, given that you're in South, you may be encounter with some rubbish elderlies, bones, some kind of middle-aged writers. How can we put up with them, given that some of those rubbish elderlies are in our home? Some of my relatives are insulting you. Yeah.
You may have to ask my son to answer the question. Now, I don't have the answer for you about the first question, how we can force the government to satisfy the 5 demands or even the 6 demands of the stepping down of Carrie Lam. Actually, I just don't have the answer. I think the only thing we can do is to persist. And in the slide, that one slide, 2 slides, never mind. You may have seen the word civil resistance. That's the thing we are doing. And it is civil resilience that is we need in order to continue the resistance. So it's a resilience. And now, before the present movement, I have some doubts about the resilience. But from here, we can see, a lot of you have shown that resilience in the movement. It's longer than the umbrella movement now, more than 79 days. But we are still fighting. So that the resilience demonstrate, I think it's much more than that. Now, can that help us achieve our goal? No definite answer. But from the studies of the civil resistance movements in the world, I've read the works of many authors. They studied about the civil resistance movement in different parts of the world. Almost a consensus of all authors. The one key factor that leads to the final victory. It may take a long time, but the final victory is resilience. It is resilience. That you persist, you will not give up, you will continue to fight for justice, fight for the rights, fight for the demands. That's the factor. All authors, when they studied about civil resistance movement throughout the world, all agree that that is the most important factor. And we see that factor. So I don't know at the end how the pathway, how we walk from here to the end or to the victory, I cannot tell. But without resilience, it's not possible. And actually, I don't want to answer your second question because I'm not an expert in this field. So it's maybe some of you are more experienced and you may have better experience to share. And actually, I failed in that exercise too. That's not easy to face the kind of people you mentioned.
Some follow-up questions. Even though we can't put up with our families or our dumped elderlies, but sometimes in order to bring a victory, protesters need to bring a unification. But in the fact that right now, even though we are all anti-communists, we all anti-police terrorists, but in the midst of protesting, we have there are great oppositions. Some of violent protesters, they think that simply disobedience is an obstacle to them, or even that's useless. While those who try to sacrifice themselves to protest citizens against the police, many think that they are rioters. And even though in our camps we have opposition, and somehow this kind of oppositions leading to the failure of whole movement.
Yep.
How can we unify people?
Yeah, I think that's a very, very good comment you have made, or question you have raised. My answer is deliberation. Okay? That is, we need to come together, to share, to talk, and to listen. Now, not to talk about those very difficult middle-aged or old-age people. You're talking about even the people who are in the same camp, that we are fighting for the same cause, but because of the different views. And we have encountered that during the umbrella movement, and we are now facing similar problems, maybe a little bit better than the past, but from my experience, actually it's very, very difficult. I've been involved in the trying to help in some of the coming district council election in some of the districts. We have more than one anti-authoritarian rule people running, and how to convince them to kind of make an arrangement so that we have only one candidate. All very difficult. But the only thing we can do is to bring the people together, find ways to bring the people together. Listen first. And people may have a view that you disagree, but try to put yourself into the shoes of the others and try to understand from his or her perspective. And then, with this understanding, you may or may not adjust your original position. Take, for example, civil disobedience, okay? Or violent actions. If we listen more, and we may be able to understand, at least understand more. Now, the same way can be used for those who from another camp, but it will be more difficult. The difference, the more the difference, the more will be the difficulty in trying to understand. I'm not talking about consensus. It's still a far away from consensus. But to reduce the level of conflicts, that's already a certain achievement in conflict resolution. We disagree. We continue to disagree. But at least I understand why you assert certain things, and I will not know that you are not quite, okay? we disagree only, but you are not quite, you're not from the other side, okay? People planted to our side. So at least that understanding will be something, some kind of achievement. So I don't think we can reach the ideal world by several steps. It's a long way to go. So even if we have democratic elections, it is not the end. If you read my, actually if the slide is available, then I think, I don't know whether they prepare to share the slides with them. Then you can get the slides, and you can see I have a list of publications that I've written about it and about the article on the stages on democratic development. After we have democratic election, that's not the last stage. The last stage of the democratic movement of Hong Kong is not having democratic election. The last stage is consolidate the success. And after we have democratic election, still a lot of things need to be done. We need to continue to cultivate that rule of law culture. That culture is not just we fight for justice, because people will have a different viewpoints on what is justice. How to share about our understanding of justice. Your justice may not be my justice. How can we understand the meaning or the significance of his or her version of justice? Okay? Then we need that rule of law culture, or that democratic culture, that legal culture, and we need to continue to do the work. So that will always something for me to do, even if you have democratic election, because that's, I think, the things I'd like to do more than fighting for democracy, because it's more rewarding in doing that kind of things. And so that's the thing we need to do more and in the future. Okay, yeah. How much time do you have? Okay. Okay, I think because of the time, we have the last question. Okay. Oh, that's I. Sorry. Sorry. Okay, two questions. One here and one here. Okay.
Thank you, Professor Tai.
I'll keep my answer short, okay?
Thank you. I know you just mentioned that Hong Kong and China both are at crossroads, so we actually don't know what's going to happen, so we need to get prepared. So can you explain or suggest any concrete ways that we can prepare? Because like we are from the public of different fields, like I'm from the medical field and maybe from other different like fields of vocation. So
well, I think the first thing surely is do the things that's possible from your own position. Always start from your own position. So you are a student, or you are working in the medical field, or you are a lawyer, or you are a social worker. Everyone identify, and that's something I think the beauty of this movement is that everyone can find his or her position in the things they could do. So you can have some Silai at the Lin Nong Chang, okay, doing things. And I heard about the Lin Nong Chang at Tai Po. Now is managed by Silai, okay? It's not by the young people. The young people are gone already, and it's now every day is managed by the Silai. They have a position to do. So everyone find your own position, and I think it's no simple kind of someone can direct you to what you should do or how you prepare yourself. But understand you have your own position, but spread around your concern, not just your own little circle. You start with your own little circle, but you connect with more people. As you connect with more people, then you know more, and then you know what you lack and what you need to learn, what you need to equip yourself. So that may be a way. Okay.
Thanks, Professor Tai. I want to talk about the problem of political persecution. And maybe the protester or people in the democratic camp may think that the government are doing political persecution, for example, your case. But people in DOJ may think that the allegation is wrong. They think that they do things according to the law and things of rule of law, including maintaining the society's laws and order, and they think that they doing things according to law. They are not wrong. They are right. But so, is there any checklist or any checklist to identify the prosecution is a political prosecution?
Well, it's not easy to answer your question because what do you mean by political prisoner? That's have been a difficult question that I've been asked, and also I'm trying to ask some other people that how to define political prisoner. And according to some international organizations, that the Occupy Trail, we are not political prisoners. That it's not yet up to the level of political prisoners. So maybe you're right that they are right that compared with those who are really political prisoners in other parts of the world, the kind of things we suffer may be much lesser. And because we have the judicial independence, even under pressure, that is a kind of marginal case. Now, but I'm not so sure the coming prosecution of those who are being arrested and in this movement, I think they may encounter situations that's likely to convince the international community that they are being persecuted politically, and they can satisfy the requirements of political prosecution or persecution, and it's not, that's not a very clear definition. That's why people raise the different definitions that I've looked at, and I think it's a matter of, again, a matter of degree. If you say that my case may not up to the extent of political persecution, but beyond our case, then maybe in Hong Kong and the coming future, we may see a lot of political persecution. And I think the Hong Kong society will also need to address this point to the international community, to the United Nations, into the Human Rights Committee of the United Nations, when they review the report of Hong Kong's human rights situation. That may be raised. And Amnesty International, as I know, is looking closely in the situation of Hong Kong. And so that some international organization will be able to provide the assistance that for us to identify those criteria. And up to this point, I would only say there is not a clear-cut line to define. Okay, I think we'll end here. Thank you for coming. Thank you. And thank you for giving me the chance to give this lecture. Okay.
Thank you, Pennies, for today's public lecture. And may we now give another round of applause to Benny.
Thank you.
So the third session of the public lecture will be held on Thursday at 2:30 p.m. here in Yit Ming Auditorium. And the lecture will be given by Professor Joseph Chen Cho Wai, and the topic will be political philosophy issues arising from the movement this summer, the rule of law, legitimate authority, and political obligation. And this marks the end of this section of the public lecture. And any reporters who have further questions for Benny may find our helpers through the door to your right here. And may the rest of the audience please leave the door through your left. Thank you and good evening.
叫啲人去講。